is Patitos Gang, and today our subject is public virtue and the collapse of culture. Now, one of the things that bother people about the Nigerian condition is why we don't make much progress. Nigeria has been stalled. Forget that you can play games with statistics. As they say, there are lies, there are damn lies, and there are statistics. So officials from whatever nook and cranny can tell you whatever they like. But most Nigerians know that they have not made progress with their lives in recent times. Of course, we have the studies, the international studies, that show that Nigeria has overtaken India, a country that has 7 times as many people in it, in terms of the absolute numbers of the absolutely poor that live in Nigeria. There's also the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation study that shows that between Nigeria and Congo DRC, in a few short years, 40% of the most poor people on earth will leave. Now, if you throw into this very unfortunate mix the fact that, okay, US policy is now treating us like Afghanistan and so on and so forth. There's plenty to worry about the Nigerian condition. Why are we unable to make choices that lead to better progress than we have had? There's the thesis that it is because the arena of public life in Nigeria does not allow one rational public conversation about the issues that really affect the lives of the ordinary Nigerian people. 2, that the quality, nature, disposition of people who occupy positions of public authority in Nigeria is such that the common good of all is not their central concern. That is a generation of plunderers. They come to plunder. And so the common good is not critical. Now, if you go into political theory, history of political thought, you'll find that one of the most influential people as far as the making of the US Constitution is concerned is a Frenchman called Baron de Montesquieu, generally referred to as Montesquieu. Montesquieu's central thesis beyond separation of powers is that the arena of public life is the arena of public virtue, that it is the terrain of people who sacrifice self for the advance of the common good of all. You come down to Nigerian political thought, one of the leading thinkers is a political scientist who used to be head of the Department of Political Science at the University of Ibadan called Peter Eke. Professor Eke, who sadly for Nigeria has lived for more than 30 years now in the United States, in 1975 wrote one of the ultimate seminal pieces from Nigerian political science, Colonialism and the Two Publics, in which he laments that beyond the private realm, in the public realm, there's a bifurcation into what is civic culture and what is primordial culture. That in Nigeria, most morality, which is central to how people see public life in Western thought, is invested in the primordial realm. What shall we do about the public realm in Nigeria? How can we ensure that people who are in that realm are people of public virtue, are people of morality, as Peter Eke would argue, or people of values in leadership, as I would argue, talking essentially about the same thing. Where did things go wrong? How did culture collapse in Nigeria?
Professor Claude Eke, in some of his political thoughts, interrogated these subjects. And on one occasion back in Ahmadu Bello University, made a mention of something that back in the day, even during the First Republic, people go into office to serve, and the dignity is in service. It's not to say that you never had the big C, corruption, at that time, but almost invariably, there is a sense of shame, even from your community or your church or mosque setting, within your family, if you brought in something that's supposed to be the commonwealth, and you decide to appropriate it to yourself for purpendal purposes. That Dr. Christopher Kolade, I have a lot of respect for him. He says to us when he makes public pronouncements that we should remember at one point in time, even at the village level, you are a farmer, you could put your wares by the roadside, go out there to the farm, people will come, buy,
We're not talking about
and then
ancient days.
and drop.
When we were undergraduates, and I was at the University of Nigeria, the way newspapers were sold was that the vendor arrived every morning, kept the newspapers, put a stone on it, kept something on the corner. You come, you take the newspaper, you put the money away. In the evening, he comes, collects his money. But that is private realm, private morality. But we are in the public realm. It's interesting that you bring up Cloud Ake, because I'm actually currently writing a book that has as a working title, How Politics Underdevelops Nations. And Cloud Ake actually wrote something of a similar title back in the day. So there's no question in my mind. I'm not confused at all. Nigeria is being underdeveloped by Nigerian politicians. The question is, how did we get there?
From that family setting, of course, naturally dovetail into public space. What has been lacking, to my mind, is the kind of curriculum that we have taught our children. Civics is no more about self, others before self. When the military came and then took away schools from, and then, morality is such that it's a game of you being able to go there and steal as much as possible, and then at the end of the day, buy your way into another level.
At the CVL, Center for Values in Leadership, when we teach leadership, one of the central things we say is that leadership behavior is other-centered behavior. It's not about self. But we seem to have a consuming narcissism, this self-love, that has taken over the political space in Nigeria. The question is, how did we
And it's the reason
get
why
there?
a man will still beyond his lifetime and the lifetime of his children, and believing.
How did we get that collapse of culture? What happened? I don't know. Maybe I think Francis is trying to make a point.
So I'm not sure. I can pinpoint what happened, but I agree with Mr. Aki in the sense that these people who are in the public realm are part of the culture. And if you have a society where it is now the norm to cheat, so the people who contest for elections they are part of Nigeria. And if it has become a culture for us as a country to cheat in business, and then, you're seen as the odd man out if you want to be ethical in your dealings. So I think that the problem is as a result of the collapse, but I'm not sure I know where it started from.
Well, I would say you are very correct. I guess the question that provoked the thoughts here is, how did we get here? Yes, we got here because there are no consequences for the action, for bad behavior. That is one. And also you try to prick our mind in going in the direction of emotional disorder that we have in the country, which is somebody goes out, makes money, no matter how he makes that money, comes back. Instead of the society asking, in those days, how did you come about this money? Rather, he will be celebrated. That goes back to what we are talking about, no punishment for bad behavior. Moving forward, we center everything on our politicians. The reason is this, that they're the ones we're supposed to be looking up to. Yeah. But we've forgotten that these people that we are trying to make our role models, who are they, by the way? How do they come about? When did politics become den of, I'm not the one saying it. Obasanjo said it, that even in the House of Assembly, that all of them are criminals. That was the word he used, as crude as that can be. And yet, people are rushing it to become congressmen. The answer is not far-fetched.
How did we get here? We have not led by example. by what we do in public and private lives. We have compartmentality too. I
There is
think
unity of life. You know, we behave one way in church, hug everybody. Hey, my brother, my brother. We go to the marketplace, we cheat everybody.
secondly, I think the average family life is such that me, my wife, my children, no other person can discipline. My children, if they go wrong, that never used to be. It used to be a communal thing. Character has gone to the dogs. Competence is no more a thing that we use to even judge how we get our people out, to public space. And so a motor parked out clearly will be the one that we all queue behind to represent us at national assemblies, even when they know next to nothing. Compassion is gone way beyond what anybody can even think of. Once I get it, once I'm well fed, doesn't matter what happens to my neighbor on the other side of the fence, and forgetting that neighbor that is hungry is going to wait for you at your gate.
When you talk about the middle class, it's either you are the elite or the middle class, or you are at the bottom of it all. The virtue we are talking about is the fact that we have thrown virtue to the dogs. There are no more, things are no longer in order, like Chino Achebe rightly said. Everything have fallen apart. And that got to be who we are as a person. Because there's this saying that says, if you really want to know who a Nigerian is, just put both of them in one place and see how they will connect.
We'll find out whether there are anthills that have been built on the savannah.
When the government is saying that way, it will be reduced. The number of people that are just striving to get there.
Public virtue, when do you define culture? How do you define culture? The culture everywhere in this country differs, from the east to the Midwest to the south to the north. So what may be acceptable to somebody from Oyo State may not be acceptable to somebody from Sokoto State. So you have to define which culture generally. Are you talking about educational culture or musical culture or what? Culture differs within the same context of this country. Perhaps look at the change in everything that is about Nigeria. Nigeria is a complex society that needs re-engineering. It has to start with us, not with the legislatures, because they will not change it. They are self-centered, unprincipled human beings who will not change anything in this country.
Civilization, as be as it may, has to some extent eroded some of our traditional culture that we used to have, okay? And we also see institutional culture. What I call institutional culture, we see that we have the culture of impunity today in Nigeria. Corruption has also become a culture in our system, whereby there is a lot of stealing, looting, and what have you. And this has become a way of life that whatever we do today, we see settlement, you must settle. You even looking for a job today, people don't get the job.
And we are back. This is Patitos Gang. We've been talking about the collapse of culture and the demise of public virtue in Nigeria's public space. Why is it that it is possible for a small country of poorly educated people living on the tips of the Straits of Malacca to build one of the greatest economies in the world and have one of the highest qualities of life in Singapore? Why is it possible that a Brazil that has floundered and flunked and gone this way and that way can get a Cardoso as finance minister and he commits literally intellectual, personal suicide in embracing a new way that saw Brazil resume growth. Why is it possible that Rwanda can come out of a terrible genocide and under a certain leadership be able to make such incredible progress, and that Ethiopia would produce a prime minister that wins the Nobel Peace Prize within months of getting into office, and the Ethiopian economy is really beginning to boom, and light manufacturing industrial parks are all happening, and Nigeria, nothing is happening. Why is it possible? What has gone wrong with nature of the public space in Nigeria that we are that far down?
Because
Where did the collapse come?
we have not told ourselves the basic truth. We have not put the mirror and look at ourselves and tell ourselves that we have not displayed all those C's that I mentioned. The four C's: character, competence, compassion, and capacity. Those who lead us are not amongst our first, our first 11, not even our second 11. Why do we have such a convoluted system that the very worst of the worst are the ones we have at the helm of affairs?
Obieze Kwesili is just in the middle of a project from the Robert Bosch Foundation in Germany, examining precisely this issue and trying to find out how the political space has managed not to be competitive and therefore get the people who can bring fresh ideas. People always say, okay, you guys complaining, why don't you join the party? And you know that the party is designed to prevent you from, and you know that there's no democracy anyway, that the party process is designed ab initio to block thinking people from entering the arena, and that everything that happens there is literally driven by corruption. So there's a coup d'etat. Political parties have carried out a coup against the Nigerian state and the Nigerian people, literally speaking. So you can't get people of virtue enter the arena. So what do you do when that is the case? What do people do?
Well, moving forward, what you do is to make sure you put clearly those who put in the round who...
How do you do it?
This is what I'm trying to explain here. This is how you do it. You make sure that there is checks and balances. And whoever commit any kind of crime or goes against the government should be able to be seen to be punished. Not by giving some people
the French writer
in their hand.
The French writer Frederic Bastiat, in one of his famous monographs, The Law, talks about the idea of legal plunder, that the disposition of man is plunder, and that when man captures power, he legalizes plunder and it becomes the law, which is really what we are dealing with in Nigeria. But invariably, and this is the real lesson, invariably, people revolt against plunder. The question is when, how, but they will eventually revolt against plunder. But the greater damage is when those who finally succeed in revolting against are people of plunder themselves, who want to become the new plunderers. And what we've seen in Nigeria is Bastiat played out live. How do Nigerian people finally liberate themselves from their liberators?
Like you said, the complicit middle, when it happens, this revolution, the very poor people will not know the difference between the people who are in Abuja or wherever, or the so-called leaders. They would assume that once you have a car, you're one of them. So what happens? They eat you, they eat us, you know. So Nigerians should actually just say enough.
I'm happy you are saying
enough.
that, Francisca. It happened before. Alabama women riots, from riots of Kuti, trying to emancipate in Abeokuta. I think we should be ready to name and shame people, be consistent with it. When those people bring in their stolen wealth to religious institutions, whether church, mosque, or shrines, people should question. From the family level, your child or your ward comes in with what you know, ask those questions. The whistleblowing policy, I think, should be much more expanded, such that we can protect those who try to expose some of these bad people.
I mean, there's a little interesting story about one fine day in 1998, I think it was around October or so. I arrived in Manila in the Philippines And as I landing in Manila, all I was thinking about was Marcos and how a group of little women with their chaplets and candles, they claimed they were inspired somehow by the Cardinal Archbishop of Manila, Jim Cardinal Singh. So I was thinking as my plane was landing, I was thinking of the Filipino experience. These women, we just went out there to pray and just occupy the streets. And at a point in time, Marcos ordered the tanks on them. And the general who led the tanks looked at the women and turned the tanks on the palace. And that was the end of the dictatorship of Marcos. Oh, I think the dates are clear because that was the week Abiola died. Because as I was landing, I then heard rumors, or not, I heard the story that Abiola had died in Lagos, and then there were riots going on in Abuja. Well, he died in Abuja. There were riots going on in Lagos. And then I went to church. When I got to church, the priests were firing, not about Abiola, from their ears about their then current president. And they went on and on and on. When I left Manila, I flew to Tokyo. As I was landing in Tokyo, they had forced this president to resign again. So
what happened there is consistency.
Yeah.
No, at one point in time, we said we are not being properly ruled, so we all marched to Ojota. After some time, we all came back. I think what has not happened in our cultural space as Nigerians is to be consistent, to be painstaking, to stay the course, like what happened in Manila. Those they are going to turn against us. I know it's easier said than done. They have conscience. They are children. They are what? They are brothers. They are sisters. And at the end of the day, I also think our religious institutions go back to this because our eroded values. We take some of these things. Some people believe that when you take some of this commonwealth of the states, you can take it to church and your sins can be wiped off. Well, I think right questions should be asked, from that level. I also think that the way we prize our education, I know people who come out with first class from universities today. They are buying newspapers for professors. And people who have not gone to school are sagging, they are doing the Malian thing and stuff like that.
And one thing I wanted to add there is because we are not a nation.
It's the big C.
Nigeria is not a nation.
The corruption.
What we are tribal enclaves. And because of that, everybody seems to say this is our own thief, this is our own armed robber, leave us alone. So that's
all right. People are trying to hold on to their own armed robbers and their own thieves.
Yes.
But all of us are paying a price for it. It's time to go. I hope you can follow this conversation. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all the other handles that are running on your screen there. Very important subject matter. This collapse of culture has to be overcome for Nigeria to find its place as a respected nation in the Committee of Nations. We'll see you next week.